Join me for today's Yin Yoga hip opening series. Your hips will say namaste. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. So to start today's yin practice, we are going to be doing a little bit of kneeling. So if you do like some extra cushion, if you have a small yoga cushion, a pillow, you can definitely fold up a blanket or a towel to tuck underneath your knee, or you can also fold your mat over to give you some extra cushion that way. So just take a second, if you haven't already got those props handy, bring them onto your mat and then we'll get started. So we're going to begin today's class with a little bit of a upright hip series, and then we're going to move down onto our mat. So we're going to start with our cushion underneath our right knee, stepping the left leg forward, coming into a nice low lunge position. You may also want to use a block here. You could rest your hand on the block. You could bring your hand up onto your thigh. But if you're looking to go a little bit deeper, instead of coming down to the bottom, I'd rather you stay up at the top and then look towards lifting your right arm, possibly your left arm, or going into a little bit of a back bend from there. Because what that's going to do is that's going to help open up the line of fascial stretch from your hip a little bit better than if you go closer down to the ground on your mat. So if you think of it this way, if you have a string tied from your knee to your shoulder, how can you make that line of stretch the biggest? And it wouldn't be in this position. That doesn't mean that we can't stretch in this position. It's just not where we're starting today's class. So finding a comfortable position for your low lunge as we start to settle in to the practice. Closing your eyes if you like here, that will test your balance a little bit more. Or just find a comfortable gaze as you look down towards the floor. And you can back off this stretch at any point. So if it starts to feel like it's a little bit too intense, let's change it. Let's make it a little easier. Shift your weight back a little bit. Going a little bit deeper, like I said, coming up onto the thigh or beginning to raise the arms. You can also work to slide the back leg further back. So the more split your legs are, the more intense this low lunge stretch is going to be. And we're going to hang out here for a couple of more minutes. Sorry, not a couple more minutes, a couple more breaths. Taking nice deep breaths here. And as we take the last couple breaths, if you felt like you might want to go just a little bit deeper into the posture, now's a good time to venture there. Perfect, and from here, we're just gonna modify this position to come into lizard stretch. So now we are gonna come down to the ground, and this definitely could be you using a block or a stack of books to lift you a little bit higher if the ground reach is fairly difficult for you. And not only difficult, looking to see if your back stays in a nice neutral position. So are you maintaining that little bit of lower lumbar curve if your hand is all the way down to the floor? If it starts to look really roundy and hunchy and you're really pulling your hips back, then let's prop it up a little bit to make it better for you. I want you to walk the front foot off the edge of the mat, or just to the edge of the mat, to the side a little bit, and then start to open up the hip a little bit more here as you let your hips drop to the center. Let your hips open, which will cause your knee to start to roll open to the side. This might mean that the big toe side of your foot is going to start to come off your mat. As you start to add gentle pressure towards the knee, opening the hip just a little bit more. If it's pleasing for your body, start to turn and rotate as you look up and over your left shoulder. And just holding here. If you do feel any pain in your knee, I do want you to come back to just a straight lunge. But the movement here is not in the knee joint and it's not in the ankle joint either. It's all in the hips. Nice deep breaths. And today's hip series is fairly short, so it's a great practice that you can tune into often to really make your hips happy. This would also be a great warm-up or cool down to other exercise if you're doing some other fitness activities. Let your hips relax like they're melting down towards the mat. Perfect, and we're gonna transition from here right into pigeon stretch. So you're just gonna come on back. You're gonna start to walk the left leg over as you bring it down and bring your bum down to the mat, or get there any way that you can. I'm gonna slide that cushion out, but you could definitely leave something underneath your knee if you like. As you tuck your foot down, start to roll over, and then opening up the hips as we come into pigeon stretch, or Ekapada Raja Kapotasana. Sliding the back leg back, so splitting your legs as much as you can. As we work towards lowering the left buttock closer to the mat, feel free to come down onto your elbows, resting your head on your hands, taking your head all the way to the floor. Or maybe it feels better for you to stay at the top. So finding any variation of this position, maybe changing it up a little bit, trying a few variations. As we settle in for a little bit longer hold here. And just being very gentle with your hips. So even though we're gonna stay here for a little bit, we don't wanna bring ourselves to a place of pain. So we're looking for this to just be about a 7 out of 10. This is a great place to work on breathing deep. Start to let everything relax a little bit more. Finding maybe a little more quietness with your mind. Taking just a couple of more breaths here. Good, and let's start to ease ourselves out of that pigeon position just by tipping over, coming on to the left buttock, and then just sliding your legs out from there. And then we can just come back to kneeling. If you feel that you need to move around a little bit, or if you need to stand up, please feel free. And we're gonna move into that little hip series on the opposite side. So again, I'm gonna take my cushion. This time I'm gonna tuck it underneath my left knee, stepping my right leg forward. And it's important to make sure when you're in that lunge position, even from the start, the second position in lizard, we're taking our leg significantly wider, but to make sure that it's still wide enough that you're not gonna get stuck on your own hips here. So if you're too much straight in front, you're gonna limit your range of motion. And where that sweet spot is going to be a little bit different for everybody. And it's particularly a little bit different for most men and women. So just take a second to make sure that your hips have room to slide into that open space. Taking nice deep breaths here as we start to let the hip open. Remember, you can find lots of variation in this posture depending on how open your hips generally are, how warmed up you are, how you feel today. Making sure that you're not pushing yourself too hard, you're not bringing yourself to a place of overstretching. Taking a few more breaths here, so if you felt you wanted to progress a little bit deeper into the posture, but don't feel pressured to go deeper, just be comfortable where you are. If you're in the right amount of stretch, if it feels good for you. Perfect. And we're going to begin our transition coming into lizard stretch. So remember, your block could be used here, or if you don't have a yoga block, this could be anything sturdy that you could place your hand on. And if you are using a yoga block, remember it has a couple of different levels. So depending on where you need it to be, just adjust. As you walk your leg to the side, start to let your knee wander over as your hip opens a little bit deeper. Turning and looking, breathing. Adjusting your position at any point here if you've gotten yourself in just a little bit too deep, or if maybe you feel that you have a little bit more room to move. Staying here for just a few more breaths. And as we open the hips, we're really thinking about stretching through the front of the hip. So we're really stretching through the front of the hip now, as well as getting some good activity in our groin. Perfect. And as we start to come out of here, we're moving into pigeon stretch, which is not only stretching the front of the hip, but the back of the hip, which is the glutes, or your buttocks muscles. So bringing yourself down here. Let yourself get comfortable. Making sure that your knee is nice and wide, so it should be about shoulder width, or if your arms were up, approximately where your right wrist would be. And if you sink more into the bottom of this, so bring your elbows down, your head down, that general area, you're gonna find a little bit deeper stretch into the glute muscles. If you spend a little bit more time in the upright position, you're gonna find a little stronger stretch over on the upright hip, or the left hip on this side. So you might decide to spend a little bit more time higher or lower, depending on where your hips are holding the tightness. Spending just a few more breaths here. Good, and we're slowly gonna move out of the position here. Just taking your time as you shift to the side. Let your legs come back together. And we're now going to finish with two postures where we're lying. If you do have a yoga block or a cushion, or potentially both, just keep them close by so that you can use them if you wish. The first posture that we're gonna move into is lying bound angle. So if you have bolsters and yoga props and you wanna use them, you might set them up like this so that you're lying with your back on the bolster. Make sure your head has a cushion, or if you have a longer bolster, that your head will be supported. I'm gonna show it today with no props for those who may not have props with them today. So lying back on your mat or on your bolster, put your feet together. Let your knees open wide to the sides. And you could take props or pillows and tuck them underneath your thighs here. If you find that this is a little bit too intense for your groins, and what would be too intense is if you really feel like you're holding your legs up. If they don't feel like they can relax here, then it's definitely time to either add some props or just bring your legs to close. And you can come into this tented knee position instead, which is also a really nice release for your hips. Your arms can relax down by your sides. If you're looking to get a little bit of shoulder and chest opening today in the practice, you can take your arms into a wide T or start to move from there to a W position, or maybe coming into cactus, which would be two 90-degree bends, or even just something where your arms are reaching over your head. Whatever feels comfortable in your practice today, what your body is asking for. So the difference between using the bolster underneath your back and not, if you're using the bolster, it is going to give your chest and shoulders a little bit deeper of an opening, which can feel nice. Today's class is really about hip opening, so it's not doing anything different or extra for our hips. We're getting that right from this position here. And as we rest in the posture just a little bit longer, that extra time really allows the muscles, the connective tissue to release more deeply. And if we can get more relaxation, more tension release, we can get a lot more opening happening in our body. We can find a lot more length over time in those structures. And that's what's really improving our mobility and our range of motion. So try not to rush when you're stretching. Perfect. And we're going to finish today's practice with one more posture, and we're going to do supported bridge. If you don't have a yoga block or something firm that you can put underneath your backside, and that could be a firm cushion, you just don't want anything that's too squishy, then I'll get you to move into this tented knee position and hang out there instead. But otherwise, we're moving into supported bridge. So you're gonna lift up your hips, slide your block or your cushion underneath, and you want it to rest in the firm part of your upper buttocks. So it's not in the bendy part of your lower back. So it should be just coming in a little bit lower than your waistband. Assuming that you're wearing regular waisted pants. If you're wearing high waisted pants, then of course you need to push the block down significantly further than where the waist would be. Remember, your block has different heights depending on how you turn it. So find the height that's comfortable for you. And then just let yourself really just start to settle in here. Your knees could be more bent, they could be more straight. Your knees might turn towards the center more, they might decide to flare to the outside. Just really not try to position them in any specific place. Just let them find where they're most comfortable. Let your body feel like it's heavy and that the block is just gonna hold you there. You're not flexing your glutes or your buttocks muscles. You're just letting everything unwind and relax here. Taking one last nice big deep breath here. As you start to lift through the hips, press into your feet, slide the block or the cushion out. And as you come down, it might feel good to tuck your knees into your chest, maybe rocking a little bit side to side, or maybe it feels good for you to stretch all the way out. And then making your way back up to seated. I do hope that you enjoyed today's short hip releasing series. Practice often, that's where you're really gonna get the most benefits. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel for more great videos. If you do have any comments, any questions, hit me up in the comments. I'd be happy to help or answer your questions. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll finish the practice with our hands at our heart. As we say thank you to one another, we bow our heads and say namaste.